All right, welcome to the Maze Project Part 2. This is second part of the tutorial. We're going to basically go over for week 1 of the Maze project. And again, we have a lot of tutorials this first week just to kind of get to know the program. But again, the actual end product isn't that much. I've added the first tutorial here under Watch the Actual Project below. And then I have this PDF slideshow link, which is this slideshow we're going to go over real quick right now. So this is the uh, actual project here. You'll see actual examples of, for the maze project. So this is student work from the past, and they did spend, a few weeks working on these, and we're going to cover a lot of these, step by step. So week 1, we're just kind of going to get you kind of used to Maya. So don't expect that your first maze will look something like this in week 1. But by the end of the weeks, the 3 weeks, you should have something, very capable to have something really cool looking like some of these here. These are just a couple different maze objects that have come up with student work here. And here's what we're going to do for week 1. So you're going to create at least 2 levels, include stairs, entries, and some basic modeling objects, and then take 2 screenshots of your maze. So here's an example of a screenshot. Again, that's the window symbol with the print screen on your keyboard. And here's another one. So these are a couple of screenshots of the beginning of a maze. In the second week, you'll refine, so you'll have more time to model and actually make your primitives. And then you're going to add materials and then take 2 screenshots. Materials aren't going to show up until you render, but we'll talk about what they'll look like in the display. And then the third week, you'll actually refine the primitives even more and add lighting, and then create 3 or more renders at sort of 2048 by 1024 resolution. So it's looking like something like this. So here's a nice render, and here's another render of some maze here. Okay, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. But how do we get to there? Well, there's a lot of stuff we're going to cover here. So in Maya here, I have this open scene, which you saw some renders here. I'm going to turn off some of these layers here. I think I'm going to leave the one geo here, just kind of give you an idea here. And again, just to review real quick, if you hold the Alt key and then left click to rotate, middle click to pan up and down, side to side, and then right click with the Alt or Option key if you're on a Mac to zoom in and out. If you roll with the zoom, it'll kind of roll in and out, but it'll be more jagged zoom. So yeah, 3-button mouse is what you'll need to navigate. Now, last session I talked about how my setup here looks different. Like I have these little numbers here. This is information I like to keep on in terms of the geo here. So if I select everything here, it has the amount of polygons, and we'll have a separate lecture on that later on. But if we go to display, heads-up display, I can turn that off. It's this poly count here, and you'll see that disappears here. The stuff on the left here, you may not see this on yours. This is called the outliner. So your workspace is probably going to look a little bit different than this. And so if I revert this Maya Classic to reset current workspace, this is what your workspace probably looks like, something like this. You can click up here on the right and choose different setups. These are different setups depending on what you're doing. There's like a modeling standard, there's a sculpting one, there's the UV editing workspace, there's an animation workspace. So it's kind of fun to see the different workspaces and what they do. But typically we're going to stay at the Maya Classic. It's sort of a good overall workspace. The only thing I like to change here is I like the outliner to show what's in the scene here. And that's this guy on the bottom of these little tools here. If you click on that, this is the outliner. And you can move in between here to expand it or shrink it. If you need to shrink any of these panels, you can just basically just like click in here and kind of move it. So they go to a certain degree here. And yeah, so basically this is why I have my scene here. I'm going to turn off all this geo, and you'll see my grid here, which is might be different than yours. So the grid settings, which you can hide the grid if you click this little icon here under the show menu. It's this little widget guy here. But you can also do it under display. You can uncheck grid and then go to display and recheck grid. And there it is. By the way, you really can't break Maya. There's lots of these drop-down menus here, And each of them have these little tabs that you can click on and tear off. You can close it out and it will still be in there. So that's something to know. There's also like a main control here which switches some of these menu sets here. So just make sure that you're on modeling, which should be the default for Maya when you open up. And here's your grid here. Now again, your grid might be a little bit different than this. And your grid settings, I'll go to display grid and I'll reset that too by clicking in here. I can click on this and just simply go to edit and choose reset settings, and this will set it here, and just hit apply and then close, and now I have my reset grid here. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on a polygon cube here, and again to frame in on it, because you can see as I move around things are going kind of wacky. It's not rotating quite nice, but if I hit the F key with that selected, now when I rotate around, it's rotating around that one object. So the first thing I want to kind of cover here is how to move objects and arrange them, and how to create them. So you got your primitives right here in the polygon menu set. We have a sphere which we can click on, and so there is a cube underneath here. You can see it if you hit the number 4 key. You can kind of see underneath and see that. If we hit number 5, we're back to shaded solid. So what I want to do is I want to move this one off to the side. So I'm going to click on the arrow here and move it over. And the hotkey for this move tool here is W. So I'll use the hotkeys a lot, but I just want to point out where they're at first. So this will move in the X, Y, and Z axis. When you're moving these objects, try and always grab the arrow. If you grab from the center here, you're moving all the transforms at once, all 3, and it's less accurate. You'll kind of see it over here in your channels how they're translating. So as I move the X here, now it's moving on the X axis. If I click on here, it's moving on the Z. Now these little planes are kind of cool because when you click on that, it's moving in 2 axes at once. And sometimes that's kind of fun to slide things around, especially on the ZX axis here. So you can move things around. You can rotate. So that's what this one is here, which has the hotkey of E. So I can rotate this sphere if I want. And then I can click on the next one down, which is the scale, which is R. And the scale tool, if you scale from the middle cube, you scale uniformly. But if you scale any of these other cubes, you kind of squish and distort. And this is where it becomes kind of fun to play around with. Now, if I do want to reset this, I can undo a few times. I can hit Control Z a couple of times and kind of reset it. But say I did squish it like something like that, what I can do is over here in the channel box, I can highlight these values here from translate to rotate Z and type in a value of 0 and then hit enter. And that will reset all those transforms. Now the scale is still wrong, and scale by default is set to 1. So I have to highlight these 3 and type in a 1 and hit enter. And now I have the sphere back at the center and it's scaled correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and move it off to the side. I got a cube here. I'm going to move. By the way, you might not even be creating objects as you're clicking. I forgot this. When you are creating objects by clicking this, sometimes you don't have interactive creation selected. So under the create menu here, there's this thing, polygons primitives. Down here at the bottom, I have interactive creation. Let me do it this way. So click on create polygon primitives, and I'm going to go out to this little tear out bar and click this. So here's your parent primitives here, and you can choose to uncheck or recheck interactive creation. So watch what happens now when I click on the cube. It says click and drag, and then drag up to create the height of that cube. So you can work that way for the creation. Same with the sphere. I can click and drag and then release, and I get the sphere. For other ones like the torus here, if I click and drag, and then I click and drag, it does something else. It basically changes the form on the fly. I prefer not to work interactively like that, so I'll delete all these. I like to keep this interactive creation unchecked because it's much easier to have more control by just clicking on it and it appearing here in the stage here. Then if I want to scale it, I can simply grab the scale tool, which has the hotkey of R, right? So the first thing I'm going to share with you how to do in this tutorial is basically create a set of stairs. So I'm going to kind of squish this into a plane of some sort. Maybe I want it to be a little bit thicker here. And then there's this great hotkey that you can do to duplicate objects. And I have it in the hotkeys in the, if we go back to Maya here, or the canvas here real quick, under the home page here, here is the hotkeys. So if you click on this, it'll have a list of all the hotkeys in Maya that we use over and over and over. There's a few of them, and I'm going to have a video that kind of goes through them step by step. But if you hit Control and then D, you make a copy of this. And so I can pull it up and then pull it forward, and I have a copy of this. Now, if I don't do anything else and I still have this selected, watch what happens when I hit Shift D. So I hit Shift D. What's happening here is it's remembering to transform and move it at that same distance, which is pretty cool. So I'm essentially creating a series of stairs very quickly. And it's very, very fast and easy to do that. So I can select all these, and I can move them as one, one whole unit there if I grab it like that. If I want to group them, if I look in the outliner here, there's a bunch of them here. I can hit Control G, and that will create a group. And then I could rename it by double clicking it and giving it a name. And then that group, if I ever want to select the whole group, I have to just click on one of these and hit the up arrow. And now I have the entire group. The only problem with grouping is that the pivot ends up into the center of the stage here. So you can change the pivot to the center of the objects here by going to Modify and go down to Center Pivot. And now that pivot will be in the center of your objects here. Now we can move all these stairs as one. Now the nice thing about that hotkey of the Control D is, say I want another set of stairs. Well, I can just hit Control D, and look at that, I have another set here. And so I could have these going maybe the opposite direction. Maybe I will rotate this one. So I'm going to hit E for rotation, and then I'm going to kind of grab this green line here, and I'm going to rotate around. And I'm rotating on the Y here, and I'm going to type in -180, which is just a little bit of math, but that is basically flipping it the other direction. Now I can hit W and kind of move it in place and kind of line it up. Now, if I want more precision in these movements, like where I'm lining things up, this is where the space bar works. If you tap the space bar, don't hold down the space bar because that's a hotkey thing, but you have to tap it. You go into what's known as the 4 views. So any of these 4 views you can maximize. You got the front view, the side, the top, and the 3D view. So I'm going to maximize this side view here by hovering my cursor here and tapping the space bar. Then I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of bring this down till they just basically intersect a little bit there. And then tap spacebar to go out, and then I'll tap spacebar again with my cursor in here, and now I'm back in that 3D view. And you can see how I've kind of aligned things. Now, if it's not exactly perfect, I can go to one of the other views, or I can kind of just like move it like that. At this point, if I did want to group both of these as one whole massive group, you can put groups inside groups. So I can hit Control G, and now I've got even a larger group. Again, the pivot's in the center here. So if I want to put it in the center here, I go to Modify and then go to Center Pivot, and then I have another one here. So check this out. I can hit Control D again, and now I have my cool stairs. Now watch this. I'll end there, and then now I'll hit Shift D, and I'll do that a couple of times. And you can't see it, but I'll zoom out here. I have essentially made stairs going up to almost infinity here, which is kind of wild. So it's pretty easy to make stairs just by hitting Control D or Shift D to create that. Now, I recommend keeping things simple and get comfortable kind of moving things around. Any of these objects, once they're on here, all you got to do is hit Control D to duplicate it, and then you can move it over, and then you could scale it out, change it, the size, whatever you want. So you don't always have to create another new unit of something, right? And just remember, as you're moving around, hit the F key to frame in on it if you want to pivot around that object, okay? There are other forms here that are kind of fun to play around with. The torus is a nice one. I'll move that one out. And if you do want to get into the actual dimensions here of the torus, here's another little extra feedback here. And I have separate tutorials for all this on my YouTube tutorial site. I'll kind of show you in a sec here. But if you click on the Polytourious input here, you can actually click on these different values, and this is what makes up the torus. So the radius here, if I hold the middle mouse button down and kind of scale it out, I can scale that out. I can click on here and change the radius, which is like the thickness of that. And then if you want to twist it, there's a twist option here, which basically doesn't do much here. But the subdivision does. So I can increase that and make it smoother, or I can reduce the subdivisions. And I can bring it down to almost like polygon or a triangle even right there. And then I can increase subdivisions in the height. And again, I'm just middle clicking and dragging to do that. But I can also just type in values here. So if you like typing in values, you can just experiment and see what does 20 look like? Oh, okay, 20 does that. And so it's a lot of it's just kind of fun and discovery. Again, you're not doing any real modeling, you're just changing values here, and then you're moving the object around. So something like this is how I created the rounded geo. If we open that back up here. Now my scale is quite a bit larger here, but this rounded shape here is fairly much like that. I've modified a little bit, and we'll get into some more modeling the next week. This week I just want you to move things around and try the stair step thing. Now the rotation one, I'll kind of show you how to do that real quick. That one's kind of fun too. So let me turn this off again, and then I'll zoom in here. Now again, if you lose everything, what you can do is you can hit the A key and then you can drag across and hit the F key, and it will frame on anything you like in here. But if you have your outliner open, you can select something, especially if you don't have as much stuff as I do. You can click on something and just hit the F key and it will frame it on that object. Okay. So what I want to do here is I want to make a more rounded staircase. I'm going to grab one of these, and I'll grab the bottom one here again, and I'll just hit Control D, move it out. And then what I'm going to do here is, okay, to make this rotate around, it's a little trickier. But what you can do is you can duplicate it. So again, hit Control D, duplicate it, move it up to whatever value you want, and then move it forward. But the key part here is once I move to the rotation, I can't go back to the move tool. So I kind of want to move it in just the correct amount, say something like that. Then I can switch to the rotation tool, which is this one here again in the tools here, and then rotate a little bit, something like that. At that point, I can hit Shift D, and now it'll constantly rotate and duplicate and move it forward. So as long as I don't deselect it, I can hit Shift D. So the main issue here, again, if I select this object here, I duplicate it, Control D, move it forward, move it up, and then I deselect it, and then I hit Control D, nothing happens. It says error, didn't duplicate. The reason why is because I deselect it. So that's the important part here, okay? So you want to make sure you select the object, hit Control D, move it up, move it forward. If you want to rotate it again, you can rotate a little bit, and then immediately hit to Shift D, and that will repeat the action to create this really cool and amazing staircase. And as long as you don't deselect it, you can see I'm moving really far out. I can keep hitting Shift D, and it will keep adding and adding and adding. Now, depending on your computer's memory and disk space, you can crash your system. So you always want to make sure when you're done to save your work and to save often. So that's really critical. So again, go File, Save Scene, and just click Continue. Now, I have a third version of this so far. So what I like to do every once in a while is I go File, Save Scene As, and then I'll just highlight the 3 here, leave the .ma. That's really important, but add a 4. I renamed mine Maze1 Kleckner, my last name, .ma, and then hit Save As. And now I have a 4th version in here, and when I save the scene here. Now, and I just want to make sure it's in the correct location. It's in the Documents, Maya Projects, Maze Project, Scenes folder. So that's all correct. So yeah. So I have fun making staircases, moving objects around. Again, all I got to do is click on these polygon primitives, use the transform tools. And the next week, what we'll do is we'll get into a little bit of modeling, a little bit more of that. We'll kind of explore that, and then adding materials to some of your objects. But if you are interested in looking forward, if you're really getting into this whole idea of Maya, you can check out on YouTube. I'll probably include some more of these actually. If you click on the playlist here for my name, James Kleckner, I have a section here called 3D Design, which is the projects we have. But to know Maya, we have Maya tutorials. There's Maya polygon modeling tutorials and Maya introduction tutorials. These are the ones you'd probably want to check out first. And a few of them are very linked to Canvas here. But there's quite a few of them here that'll kind of go through different things, like the grouping that I went over is in here. Now, the Maya version might be older, but it works pretty much the same. Okay, so we will have some newer tutorials for some of the new features of Maya, but for right now, just check this out. Here's the Maya duplicate special, which is basically using the Control D Shift D, but there is an actual command to do it too, which is kind of fun. So yeah, until next time, see you soon. Cheers.